Hello. So today we're going to be looking at the origin stories and what they say to us about God. You've read the five or so origin stories, which are intended to be the prehistory, that is, before uh, the earliest history of humanity. They aren't meant to be history, they're meant to be statements about what it means to be a human being. So we don't speak, in the Catholic world at least, we don't speak about what year Noah's flood happened in, or archaeological evidence for the flood of Noah. We don't do that because we understand that the story of Noah actually teaches us about God, about humanity, and about our place in the world, for example. So let's take a look. Uh, we've read stories in the Bible. You've read stories in the Bible about Adam and Eve, the creation of the world in the first persons. There's actually two creation accounts, and you'll notice that they're different. Um, the first one is God creating the world in 6 days and then resting. In that story, humanity, for example, is created at the end. Whereas in the second story, it kind of goes back to the beginning and it tells about God creating everything. He creates a garden and puts people in it, puts the first person in it, and that is at the beginning of creation. And after that, God creates animals and the rest of the world. So don't get hung up on that. Don't get too confused on the fact that there are two creation stories. They actually came from two different uh, times in Jewish history, and they were just kind of put together in one book because that's the way that they did things. And it's not correct to read them as if they are meant to be one after the other. So that's the two creation stories that involve the first persons. We call them Adam and Eve. Afterwards, the first persons disobey God and they eat the fruit of the tree that's forbidden. Um, and they, because of that, the perfect harmony that God intended for the people has been broken, and they will never again have this perfect relationship where they go walk with God and are partners with God and have everything taken care of. Instead, they're in the world that we exist in today, the world that involves pain and sacrifice, the world that includes separation from God. Um, and right on the tails of this disobedience from God, which seems to be a small thing, just eating the fruit, if we're willing to go things our own way, that means is that with Cain and Abel, we're going to have uh, murder. We're going to have violence. We're going to have strife and tension between the people who should be our brothers and sisters. And so Cain and Abel tells the story of Cain not offering the very best that he has to God, and as a result, God is pleased with Abel's sacrifice and not Cain's. This doesn't sit well with Cain, and so he ends up taking out his vengeance on Abel. So we go very quickly from being willing to disobey God in a small thing to even causing violence against those who are most like us, our brothers and sisters with whom we should have a feeling of love. And then this kind of gets worse and worse. Cain's murder of Abel just kind of gets building more and more until the entire world is evil. So there's people all over the world, but the only thing that they're doing is evil. They're only beating up on each other. They're only committing acts of violence and also selfishness against themselves and against each other. And God says, well, this isn't what I meant to happen. I created a garden where there would be perfect harmony and balance and people would be connected with me. And now the whole world's gone to be apart from me, and everything that I wanted to have balanced and harmonious has been disrupted in chaos and violence. And so he's like, I need to fix this. But he notices that amongst all the people, there's just one person who's still keeping in mind that original harmony and that original obedience to God that God always intended, and the happiness that came out from that. And so what we see is God saying, well, the whole world's ruined except even just for one person. So I'm going to save just that one person, and then we'll try starting again. So here we have the stories of God's first intention to always provide everything that humanity needs and to help humanity to walk with him in goodness. And the result of us turning away from that is violence and oppression, selfishness and separation, and ultimately destruction. So these stories are not meant to be history or newspaper accounts of what happened, like we would read in the news or online of what happened around the world in the last 24 hours. They're meant to be poetic and symbolic expressions of what it means to be human. And that's how they were originally understood. What we're going to do is we're going to take a look at what do the Genesis and origin stories say about God. So I encourage you to take a piece of paper. You're going to write a T chart, and on the left side you're going to have what God is. Oh, here you go. Here's a T chart. I'm going to draw it with my little thing. Look at me. I'm drawing. Oh, I hope your T chart's better than mine. So the question is, what does Genesis say about God? What is God like according to these stories? And then we're going to try to find evidence from Genesis about it. So let's take a look at the first one. God is the one who made everything. I'm going to try to fix this. There we go. God is the one who made everything. So that's important for the first community that talked about Genesis, and it's important for us. What we mean is that God is different from everything in the universe. So everything in the universe has time and place. Everything in the universe that we can perceive has matter and energy, and we say that God made all of that. So we wouldn't ever be able to find all of God in any one time or any one place. We wouldn't say that God is this big or God has this smell or this flavor. God is so beyond the universe that he is bigger than the entire gigantic universe, and he's also smaller than any of the tiniest molecules or atoms. He's in every atom and he's in every moment. And from the very beginning, today we talk about the Big Bang as the beginning of the universe. God was before that and beyond that, and through all the billions of years since, every single moment, every single second is now to God. God sees it all in one ability to see everything at once, which we can't really grasp ourselves. We don't understand how God can be in so many places and still be here, and we don't know how God can be throughout all of history and still now. So when we say that God is the one who made everything, it's all of these things that are kind of conveyed by this. It means that God is beyond the universe that he made, but he's still present in it. So the evidence from Genesis is God created the universe. In some translations, it's God created the heavens and the earth. And that is, God is the one who made everything, everything that there is. All right. Also, we see that God is happy with creation and with humans. This is a different kind of idea than many of the myths and many of the religious teachings that were surrounding the nation of Israel when these stories are being written down. Some myths have the gods destroying their enemies and then making creation out of the corpse of their enemies. So they might have slayed another powerful god, and that dead body becomes the earth, and then they kill the god so bad that droplets of blood jump out, and those droplets of blood become humanity. And so there's lots of violence, and we've got gods who are creating humans just to make them slaves and to make sure that the humans are worshiping them. It's different in the Bible. In the Bible, God looks at everything he made, and he especially looks at humanity. And he said, God was very pleased. He says, it's a good thing. These are good things that I've made, and I want to work with them. That's actually the next one. He wants to work with humans. So while other religious views, and sometimes some misunderstandings of biblical Christianity, sometimes they show that God is like trying to force humanity and like, here, do this, do this, do this. And that's simply not what's in the Bible. I mean, you can believe in that kind of God if you want, but it's not the God that the Bible talks about. God says that he wants to work with humans. He places the person in the garden, and he says, you cultivate the garden that I've made. So God makes the garden, and then the human, he takes care of the trees, and he harvests the fruits. and he protects it. In the Bible, God says, this is what I've created, and you're in charge of taking good care of it. So God didn't need anybody to take care of the universe. He made it. But instead, he chooses to share the care of his universe with the people, the humans that he's made. And so we have this idea that God wants a partnership with us. He wants, he could have done it all himself, but he says, you know what, here's some other persons, and they're smaller than me, they're less than me, they were made by me and not the other way around, but I'm still going to share everything that I do in this universe. I'm going to share it with them. And so we see that what's his intention for the universe is? His intention for the universe is to create something with which, something to share with other persons besides himself. God is a God of freedom. So if you ever get the idea that biblical or religious faith is to give up your freedom, that's not how religious people see it. Religious people see that God gives us perfect freedom. How do we see this? He says to the first person, you may eat whatever you want except the tree that gives knowledge. Now, some people see that and he's like, well, you're keeping humanity away from this one thing. But you see that God is giving everything to the person, including the ability to choose against God. So if God laid it out, so he said, well, you can choose to eat the fruit, or eat the fruit, or eat the fruit, all of that's fine with me, well, then humanity doesn't have any freedom, because God said that everything is fine, and there's no possibility to disobey me. Whereas when he creates this choice, when he creates this tree of the knowledge of good and evil, he's saying, if you don't want what I am giving, you can choose your own way. That's actually true freedom, right? The freedom to decide if we want to go with God or against God. And so while some people see it as kind of cutting off humanity, he's actually giving the gift of a choice, right? He's giving us a way out if we don't want to be in relationship with him. And that's the only thing that's the only thing that makes something true love, right? So he teaches humans how to live happy. He says, so I'm putting you in charge of it, and I've provided everything that you need. So he actually, in the creation story itself, he says, this is what I want. Have lots of children, right? Have a good time. Enjoy each other. Have a partnership, have a relationship, and take care of what I've created for you. Now, this is different from just like creating somebody and leaving them off on their own. From the very beginning, God is willing to say, you know, this is how to be happy. And he's always been willing to do that. He doesn't just create us and then step back and ignore the universe. And that's another misunderstanding about the biblical God. Some people think that God created the universe and then let it run on its own while he withheld from it so that it would operate according to its own rules. He did create a good universe. It does operate on its own rules, but that doesn't mean that God has disappeared or that God is leaving us to figure it out on our own. Now, when humans do make themselves unhappy by choosing their own way, when they do exercise that freedom and then make a bad choice, God just doesn't sit back. So God is not saying, well, you know what, you wrecked the world and you're going to have to deal with it. God is still trying to be in partnership with us. And we see this when Cain kills Abel. God comes and talks with Cain, right? He doesn't just say, oh, well, it looks like Cain killed Abel. Well, I wonder what else is on TV tonight. It's not like he doesn't care. He says, your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground. So here's a poetic expression that says that an innocent person who is acted on with violence, God cares deeply about this. And so he steps in and he says to Cain, you can't do that. And what's more, even though you can't do that, and I'm going to cause you to be cast out and wander all throughout the land, your life is still worth something. So he still values Cain's life, even when Cain did not value Abel's. And as we said about Noah and the ark, we see that, whether it's Cain or whether it's the lots and lots of people who came after him, who are living the violence and living the unhappiness of their bad choices to try to go without God, God says, you know what? I still want partnership with humanity. Even one person who's trying to follow me, I won't allow that person to be destroyed. I won't allow that person to pass away, but I will protect that person even when destruction is all around him. He says to Noah, build a boat. Everything on earth will die, but I will make a covenant with you. But I'll try again, just like I tried with Adam and Eve, to work with them and to be in partnership with them. If you, Noah, are still willing to obey me and follow along with me, I'm willing to work with you. Okay, so here we have all these things on the left-hand side. They say, how is God, what is God really like? These are the teachings of what God is really like. And we have evidence from Genesis to back that up. So we don't say that God is just like a super guy, or sometimes they say the flying spaghetti monster, that somehow hidden in the sky there's somebody who's looking down. God's not an alien who comes down to earth sometimes. God is the one who has made everything. He's not somebody who's angry with the world or with humanity, but it's someone who sees the goodness in us. It's not somebody who is distant from us, but God is somebody who wants to work closely with us. He's always reaching out to be in partnership with us. He's not a God He's not a God who takes away our freedom or forces us into one way. He gives us he gives us true freedom, freedom to choose goodness or freedom to choose evil. And along with that, he teaches what is good. So while a lot of people interpret the Bible as saying, well, you can't have this, that's all evil, and so you can't have that, and so your freedom is restricted, it's the opposite. God shows us this is good and this is evil, and you get to choose which one you want, right? He takes action. So when we make our choice, it's not like God says, well, that was the final exam. You either chose right or chose wrong. God still wants to be involved in us, even when we choose the wrong thing. So he's willing to go in, especially on behalf of people who are innocent and people who are victims of violence. He's willing to step in there. But even those who are evil, even those who have committed bad things like Cain's murder, he still cares about that person, and he says, you can't kill people, but your life still has value. And finally, even if everything's terrible, if there's just a glimmer of goodness, God is willing to step in and take that glimmer of goodness and build on it and try again and keep working towards this partnership that he originally envisioned, that humanity keeps screwing up. So we have a God who keeps trying and who's never going to give up on us. It's important that you understand these things that the Bible says about God. I'm going to ask you to try to take the things that are said about God, and I want you to try to write about it. I'm going to ask you to write a paragraph in your own words using the evidence from Genesis to try to describe what the Bible, specifically these Genesis origin stories, what they say about God.